Um, very good.
Yeah, I haven't been since before Robin left, actually.
Wow. Well, it's
So
just
I'm sure
great.
you didn't miss me.
No, actually, and I kept thinking, what is his name? What is his name? And just about 4:30, I thought Wildauer, Wild something or other. I could find you in the book or something. So anyway, and there's Miss
No,
Rainier,
it's good to know.
chair
Thank
our
you.
committee. She's going to chair, or Ricky.
Hi, thanks for joining. I'm just going to wait a few more minutes. I know a couple of people had said they want to join that are still missing. Just give it another 2 minutes, then we can jump in.
Oh, there's Ricky.
All right, folks, just a reminder that you're live on YouTube right now.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so why don't we get started? Mike, I don't know if it's possible to make myself or Kathy the host, just so that Kathy can share her screen. I know she had
So I
expressed some interest.
believe Rika, you're the host. Something just
I
popped
am.
up on my thing that said you're the host.
Oh, hold on, let me.
The security should be set now, so everyone's allowed to share, one participant at a time.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, so my name is Rika Sterrett, just as a quick introduction. I'm the deputy health agent. So if you do have any questions, we'll kind of do introductions that way, kind of as you go. You can say your name and if you're part of the committee or what your role is and your interest in recycling, if you'd like. So I'm going to give it over to Kathy in 1 second. I just wanted to give a quick update. I spoke with Dikshita. She said there's not really much of an update now on the plastic bag ban, but it is on the warrant for town meeting in the spring. So I know her hope is to get the word out to try and get support for it. So I just wanted to make you all aware. So as you speak to people, maybe make them aware that this is going to be on the warrant in the spring, particularly the RTMs, and whether you're in support of it, if you'd like to see it pass. So I know she put a lot of hard work into it. Just kind of to give a brief update on that. And then now, Kathy, I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself and jump right on in.
Sure. Hi. Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Mirza, and thank you for inviting me to your meeting tonight. I'm delighted to meet all of you. I'm a regional municipal coordinator for Mass DEP, and so I work with a region of 44 cities and towns in southeastern Mass, and I work with officials to strengthen their programs with grants and technical assistance. So we do all sorts of projects together that are all about reducing waste, recycling, composting, hazardous waste, and all that good stuff. So I was invited by Melissa and Rika to come and kind of give you a little basics about trash and recycling, not really knowing sort of what you might know about your program. But before I jump into a very brief little presentation I put together, because it always helps me to have some visuals to share with you. But I like to start by just asking basically what you know about your trash and recycling. So I'm curious, does anyone here know where your trash goes after it's picked up from the curb? Looks like Alan, yeah.
So I believe that the trash goes to an incinerator somewhere in the western part of the state, and most of it gets incinerated. And then what doesn't get incinerated goes to a landfill.
Anybody else have any thoughts?
Oh, no.
Yeah, I've been wondering about this, whether it's Waste Management, which is what we use here, or the town pickup Russell. I've been wondering if the recycling material really does get recycled with single string, or if it goes off to the incinerator too.
These are good questions. And that's kind of why I always start here is like, as a homeowner, what happens once it gets carried away from your curb or from wherever you live? Where does it go from here? Your trash does go to a waste to energy facility. It does get combusted or incinerated. It's in Central Mass. It's in Millbury. It's called Wheelabrator. And so they do capture some energy from that combustion process, but it reduces the waste by about 80% or more. And what's left is an ash, bottom ash from the facility, and that does get landfilled. So the ash residue after the burn process does get landfilled. They sometimes capture metals after the process. It's the only material that can survive that process, frankly, because of the temperature. So that's how actually most of the waste in Massachusetts does go to a burn facility like Millbury, like yours. Some of it does still get landfilled depending on where you live in the state. In terms of your recycling, Donna's question, I think, is an important one. Does anyone know where your recyclables go after it gets picked up?
No,
No.
and I've had a hard time finding out. And I'd also like to know whether they really do all those plastics they claim they're doing.
Okay, great. This is why I start here, because it's really sort of like, where are we? So your recyclables actually get picked up by your curbside hauler, and they're taken to a recycling facility, which in the industry we call a materials recovery facility, or a MRF. That's the acronym. So if you ever hear MRF, it's a materials recovery facility, or basically a recycling plant. It's where your recyclables go, and they actually have this really kind of interesting, somewhat complex machinery to sort it out. So they have machinery to sort out the paper, the cardboard, the plastic, the bottles, the cans, the materials that have value and that the facility is able to actually sort through their technology. Some facilities are more sophisticated than others. Casella is pretty good. It is one of the older facilities, and it's a very large facility. Yours goes to Charlestown. Casella has 2 facilities in Massachusetts. Your recyclables go to Charlestown. And they do market the majority of it. What does end up being trashed are what we would call contaminants. So it's either recyclables that are not prepared properly. So think of, say, a peanut butter jar. They want the jar, but they don't want the peanut butter. That would be a problem item, and that would end up going in the trash. The other contaminants would be items that don't belong in there. We're going to go through this, but it's the things they really want are just your paper, cardboard, bottles, and cans, clean and dry. If you walked away today with anything, that would be the message. It's kind of this basics: paper, cardboard, bottles, and cans, clean and dry, you're good to go. I'd like to I'm going to share my screen and just go through like about a 10-minute presentation to just give you a little snapshot, and then I'll open it up to any questions you have, okay? And feel free to just, jump in at any time.
Well, you didn't say the word plastic. You
Oh.
said paper, cardboard, bottles, and cans. Are they really
Yeah.
recycling all the different numbers of plastic?
It's not by the numbers. And so that is one of those points of confusion. I will have a slide that talks about this, but we've really changed our education statewide to try to reduce confusion about it, to get away from the numbers. And so the numbers that are on plastics are historical. And what they really tell you is they're not really meant for public information. They tell you what the resin code is for that bottle or container or packaging or, ride-on toy or whatever it is. It's 1 through 7 plastics. 1 through 6 are a distinct chemical formulation. Number 7 is other. It's basically all the rest. And we've tried to make it less complicated on the statewide level by changing our education so that we're letting folks know that you really want to go for plastic bottles, plastic jugs, plastic tubs. Those are okay. If it's not a plastic container like that, do not put it in your curbside bin. The reason the numbers are very problematic, as I'm sure you may know, because you were talking about plastic bags at the beginning here, plastic bags have a resin code number on them. they say number 2 or number 4. You don't want to put those in your curbside recycling. The facility cannot separate them out. In fact, they're one of the biggest problems at the facility. So we know that those codes are confusing and they're historical, they're manufacturing codes. So again, education is really intended to be more streamlined and hopefully simpler for folks to understand. Think about a plastic bottle, a water bottle, soda bottle, a laundry detergent jug. Those things, those types of containers, a yogurt tub, those are recyclable if they're clean, and they actually have very high value.
How about the plastic clamshells that we're getting so many of in both the grocery store and for takeout? We're just inundated with those plastic clamshells.
I'm going to show you a place where you can find out the answer to about more than 400 different items you may have questions on. But yeah, well, what the state has done is we've reached out to every recycling facility or MRF across Massachusetts to come up with a uniform set of what is acceptable and what is not acceptable to the best of our ability. And we put that on a website, and you actually have a link to that on Walpole's website already. But those clamshells, you want to look it up so we're talking about the same thing, but it's clear plastic, typically number 1. I hate to use the number, but that's what they are acceptable at the MRF that your material goes to. If it's clean, it's all clean matters. So let me show you my screen. And let me know if you can see this okay. Is it showing for you?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to do that little introduction. Let me get into this. So kind of the structure of our recycling programs are really based on this law in Massachusetts, and we refer to them in the industry as the waste bans. So in Massachusetts, we have regulations through the Department of Environmental Protection, who I work for, that were originally created starting about 30 years ago. In these waste bans, what they do is they prohibit the disposal of certain materials that we don't want to go into the trash. Okay, we don't want them to go to a landfill, we don't want them to be incinerated, and we don't want them to be transferred out of state for disposal. This is the list of all of them right now. I've highlighted the ones in red because this is what's common in a curbside program. Your aluminum containers, you can see the year that the ban came into effect, but I just want you to see, this is sort of the framework from which a lot of recycling programs were built in Massachusetts. So these are the regulations that we have on the books. Paper, metal, glass, plastic containers. It's very specific. So it's, narrow neck containers. So think, again, water bottle, laundry detergent jug, metal items. And then it's got a host of other things as well. Leaves, yard waste, lead acid batteries. Down the bottom here, it says 2021, we're proposing to maybe add some additional items for which there are strong markets. Markets for recycling mattresses effectively, recycling textiles and clothing, and possibly organics. Organics, when we refer to organics in DEP speak, we're primarily talking about food waste because it's a very large part of our waste stream. That's directed toward large generators, not toward individual households like us. So it's more, the organics ban really affects restaurants and larger facilities, not us. Not yet. I'm not going to bury you in too much data, but this is kind of interesting that I like to share. So I just showed you that we have these bans on certain materials that don't belong in the trash. So then what the state does is every 3 years, we do an audit of all the incinerators to see what's still in that trash. And this is what is still in that trash, even though we have these bans, even though we have recycling programs in most of the state. We're seeing a lot of organics. That's mostly food scraps. We're still seeing a lot of paper. We're seeing plastic. Now, some of these plastics are not plastics that our recycling facilities want, but some of them are. So for example, if you can envision a potato chip bag, that's plastic, like a plastic film-like bag. A lot of things are in sachets and packets now. that's not something that the recycling facility wants, but it's technically going to fall in this plastics category. So all these things we're still throwing this away as trash, which is problematic. But it also helps us on the state level focus on, okay, we see large amounts of this, this, and this. These are target materials that we want to make sure we can develop programs to capture them and direct it to a higher value use. It's very important. It's very important to us from an environmental perspective. For a cost perspective, which you can talk about on the municipal level for you, it matters. From the environmental perspective, this is a pie chart that the EPA generated a number of years ago, but it basically looks at greenhouse gas emissions from a systems view. And when we think about the provision of goods like consumer goods and services, and then food, the manufacturing, use, and disposal of all of our products and food generates more than 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions. This is why this is one of the main reasons we do this. And I've spoken with EPA colleagues recently about, we would like to see this updated. They've told us that actually these pieces of the pie are even larger now than they were when this was first done. So how we manage our waste and what we consume has a very big impact on climate change. So how's Walpole doing? This is probably a little hard to see, so I'm going to describe it to you. And I can make this available to anyone if they want to see it more closely, but each year we, DEP, ask cities and towns across the state to report to us how much trash they're disposing, how much recycling they are sending out for processing. But this really just looks at the trash. We always start with the trash because that's where you're going to have the biggest environmental impact and the biggest cost. What's in the trash and how can we pull out the good stuff and direct it in a better, higher value place? So Walpole is this red community right here where my cursor is. On this map, it's telling us how much trash per household is generated in this year. 2019 was our last complete year of data. The more green on the map means these households generate less trash per household. The more red on the map, it's more trash per household. And then what we do behind the scenes is we get a better understanding of which programs do these communities employ to have less trash and have a much lighter footprint. So I've pulled out this little section for Walpole so you can see more closely where you are and how your neighbors are doing. A couple things to consider here. Why is Walpole red? It shows that you're generating a little over 1 ton of trash. This is not your recycling. This is just your trash going to Wheelabrator per household each year. It's a lot. And we'd love to see that get more green over time, of course. And it's a great opportunity now to be looking at it because the town is really looking at what the program will look like in 1.5 years as your contract changes. So right now, you know that you have a tax-funded program, okay? So you don't pay out of pocket. Residents don't see any direct cost for the amount of trash that they're putting out. The other thing is you have a very generous trash program where you're allowed to put out up to 6 barrels or bags a week, every week. I believe that the bulky waste program is quite generous as well. Maybe Melissa and Rika can.
So it's one large item per weekly trash pickup.
So 1 a week. Okay, so that would be 52 items a year that's paid for through the tax base. That's extremely generous. Probably a little too generous. It's sort of like going to the buffet and overeating a little bit. Like I'm trying to think of an analogy that works for this. It's this, we give people kind of space. It's easier that way in some respects for residents because we don't really have to think about what we're putting out. But the impacts really, really show. And you're here because you care, I suspect, and you want this to be better. So I just wanted to give you a sense of where you are now. Some communities around you, there's quite a bit of variation in the programs around you. And if you're interested, I'm happy to talk about any of them. The one thing I do want to point out is if it has these crisscross lines on it, that implies that there's some pay per bag element of the program. They're not all cookie cutter. There's some variation, but there's some element where the residents have to pay for a certain amount of trash that they put out. So that usually prompts kind of a waste reduction. Ooh, went the wrong way on that one. So kind of getting back to like what we want to be doing to reduce that waste. And perhaps you've seen this hierarchy like this before. There are different versions of this, but we really want to be focusing on less is better. Less is better. So less generation in the first place before we even think about recycling. You know, recycling is another way of managing the stuff that we create, the stuff that we use. But before we even get to that, it's so much better to really reduce what we consume and put out in the first place and promote reuse to the greatest extent. If something is already made and produced and in circulation, we want to keep it in circulation as much as possible. That will have greatest impact on reducing our carbon footprint and saving money, frankly. Then if you have items that can't be reused or donated or what have you, you want to recycle to the greatest extent, you want to recycle right, and you want to compost to the greatest extent. Walpole, I always think of Walpole as being one of those communities in my region that has had a very long-standing and successful backyard compost bin program. Because you've been a leader for years in that. That's really the lightest footprint you can have in terms of managing your food scraps, is composting in your backyard. And perhaps some of you already do that. Then there's energy recovery and landfill and disposal. So those are the less desirable options. So the questions about recycling that a few of you had already, and I know you've already got a little bit of information on the town website. Recycle Smart MA is this resource that I point recycling committees to all the time because I think it's really fabulous. We on the state level put a lot of work into this in recent years to try to have uniform, consistent messaging about what's okay to recycle, what we don't want to put out in the recycling bin, and why, and to give you kind of the folks on the ground who are communicating with your residents the tools to communicate that out for education. So I want to go for a moment, if I can do this. Let me know if you can see. Did you see the switch to the screen? Can you see the Recycle Smart Recycling Guide now? Okay. This is the Recycle Smart webpage, and it is just chock full of great resources. I go here a lot myself. I encourage you to do it. I know the town of Walpole is already a partner on here. If the recycling committee would like to be a partner, you can certainly just go up to become a partner. And I'll show you what that can do for you to become a partner, because you'll get some of this information sent directly to you and you can just push it out to whoever, like if you have a Facebook group or a website for your recycling committee. But it's got these beautiful graphics that can be used across the state. It's the same messaging, so that whether you're in Walpole, Sharon, Dedham, Westwood, it doesn't matter. It's the same message, which has always been a challenge in Massachusetts. But now it's the same. And this is what is good. This is what the recycling facilities want. And you can see as I hover over this with my cursor, I can click this and go right to, if I had a Facebook page, I could post this directly. These are all intended to be just easy grab and go messaging. So it's what's okay. Your metal cans and pie plates, so the metal items, just make sure they're clean and dry. Your plastic containers, bottles, jars, jugs, and tubs. No numbers anymore, because the numbers are just too confusing. But if we show people photos of common household items, and as long as they're clean, you put the cap back on, the caps have value. But the only way they can capture them in a recycling facility is if they're on the item. If they're loose, they're typically too small. They fall through the screens. Glass bottles and jars, as long as they're clean, again, cap back on. Paper, cardboard, clean, dry, you can flatten the cardboard. And then it's got this very clear, like the top 5 do not put in your bin items. Because we see these are the most common problems that we see in the bin, in all the recycling facilities.
Oh, gosh.
Okay,
Sorry.
so, right? People bag it. People bag recyclables when they're carrying it from inside to outside. And they don't realize that when they leave it in the bag, it's a problem. But the facilities will not open the bag. This whole thing goes in the trash when it goes out like this, unfortunately. Wraps and bags and all of that film is a big no-no, as we already mentioned. And it's hats off to you for working on removing plastic bags and reducing those in Walpole. No food or liquids of any kind. If there's a little grease on a pizza box, the grease is not a problem. But if there's any cheese or pizza, it is a problem. You never want to put clothing or linens. People, we see this often. People, they think they can recycle their textiles and they may be able to, but just not in your curbside bin. And then anything that could potentially tangle. So these are the big no-nos. So I wanted to show you that. And then if you go to this website, it's just got great info. You have this Recyclopedia where you can type in, we have over 400 items in here. So if I say clamshell, plastic clamshell, I hope that you're able to see as I go how this works. Oh, it's thinking. I guess it's a little bit slow. But you also have this on Walpole's website as well, this Recyclopedia. And you can just type in anything you have a question about, and it basically just tells you whether it's trash or not. So this says a plastic clamshell, if it looks like this, put this in your recycling bin, rinse or wipe it clean. You don't want to use too much water, that would be wasteful. Black plastic should be placed in the trash. Okay, so the clear ones are okay if they're clean. So I just wanted you to see that. I wanted you to see becoming a partner. I don't have too much more. If I'm taking too long, someone just flag me and I'll show you less of this. But becoming a partner will automatically send you information on for like social media, information that you can push out very easily. We can spotlight communities. You can embed this kind of search tool, and it's all free. And you get market information too, like if things are doing really well with cardboard, you might hear about it. You get this newsletter, which is awesome. I'm going to just show you because it's on the website if you're not a partner, but if you're doing any education for your residents, I think this is a wonderful resource, and this is here for anyone. And it's over time. And so when people say, what happens to our plastic? Does it really get recycled? Because there's so many news clips in the past couple of years that things aren't happening the way we think they're happening. Some of those are general. In other words, they're not specific to Massachusetts. And trash and recycling is a very local issue. So it really always starts with where your material goes, which is why I begin the conversation there. And then knowing where that facility sends their commodities to be made into new products. So you're a customer of Casella, Town of Walpole. So the Town of Walpole can certainly say to Casella, please let us know, where does the paper go once it's sorted? Where do your plastics go? They can tell you, and they will tell you. Is it going overseas? Is it staying in the US? Most of the plastic in Massachusetts that's recycled now stays in the US. Very little is going overseas now. But you can see that there's some articles here. I won't click in because my server seems a little slow tonight. But if you want to learn about plastic, these get into it. They're user-friendly, but they tell you the details of it so you can explain it and understand it better. Is recycling broken? This gets right to the heart of it. It explains it. Single-use plastics, getting rid of them. It talks about, bottle caps. Are these an issue? Or mercury or textiles? We try to tackle the topics that we're hearing questions on most often. So I just wanted you to know that that's a place to go. Let's see. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I suggest sort of spending time in here. Oh, I guess resource is another great place for you to see too, because again, it's grab and go and it's print materials. While this is coming up right now, do you all have a recycling committee website or Facebook page or anything like that?
We do have a Facebook page, and Nancy's actually, I believe she's on the call, and she runs that for us.
Excellent, excellent. Because maybe I think you would find this particularly helpful because you can grab these things and you can just share them. They're done for you. So there's these little short 20-second videos, whether it's about, things that don't belong in the bin that we have taped at the facilities. Some basic and good information. All this social media, there's so much in here. You'll want to go in and just sort of dig around and see which topics resonate with you. And then you can just basically post it. I've got some communities in my region that are just grabbing this all the time. If it's around the holidays, they'll push out something about electronics, or string lights right after the holidays. So you can find things that are appropriate for that seasonally as well. We've got all these presentations in here. You can even request a free public presentation that we've worked with Keep Massachusetts Beautiful to do professional presentations that are public facing. So if you wanted to invite the public. Print resources, A-frame, signs. I just want you to know that in here, there's just a ton of good stuff and it's free for the taking. So I'm going to close that and pull this up again. And so this is the last slide, and I just wanted to leave you with this and then just answer any questions you may have. And you may already be doing this, but I was trying to distill kind of things you may want to think about. I'm also a volunteer on the committee in my own community. I live next door in Sharon. I'm part of Sustainable Sharon Coalition, so as a volunteer, I do that. But we work on all sorts of things, and when I work with recycling committees around the region, I think some of the fun stuff is sort of like focusing on the reduce and reuse and recycle right piece of it, frankly. So it's how do we sort of build your local Facebook page and kind of use some of the tools that I just shared, tap into some other online resources like the Buy Nothing groups, which you may already be doing, sharing sites. I'm seeing a lot more of these pop up. Look at local donation programs and how would residents even know about them? Because you've got the furniture,
Yes,
furniture bank, right, in Walpole?
yes.
So things like that. Now, maybe that's something that your residents know about, but if not, what a gem to have right there in your community and to maybe see what else is in the region so folks know. Oops, look, I have a typo here, but that's tackle single-use plastic and single-use items, whether it's plastic bags. The committee in my town, we're starting to talk to residents about takeout containers. With COVID, we've seen this like explosion of use of takeout containers. And if it's black plastic, it's trash. So part of the conversation might be even to just educate your residents that if you use something that was aluminum foil or clear plastic or even white, it would be acceptable for recycling if it's clean, rather than generating more trash. I've worked with communities that have reuse and donation events, or repair events are getting more popular. Some communities have a library of things or a library of tools for, again, this sharing economy idea. Some public libraries have a section where it's non-book items to lend. We're seeing more and more of that. So it can be anything from an electronic item to a karaoke machine to, I mean, just you name it. So you can get really creative. It can be sporting equipment. It's all sorts of things. And it gets people into the library. Composting is top dog because, as I showed you earlier, organics and food waste is the largest part of the waste stream that we need to get our hands around. And I mentioned this public presentation that you can get for free that's DEP sponsored, that's available. I put out a couple of links. I don't know if any of you are aware of this Recycle Mass Google group, but folks in the industry, volunteers like yourselves, people all across the state can tap into this, this Google group and just ask questions or share resources. Like, is there, if you wanted to do something novel, it can be you put the question out there, hi, I'm on Walpole's Recycling Committee. Does anyone have experience with X? And you'll hear from others around the state that might be doing it. And then I just put in a few websites for some recycling committees who may have some decent websites that you could tap into and get ideas. But I'll stop talking, and I welcome any questions you may have, because there's a whole lot to this industry and what we do here.
Thank you.
So I think we did have a question from Nate. She said, how do we get manufacturers to package their goods and materials?
I'm
Exactly.
sorry, that was breaking up. I didn't hear it.
So I'm gonna jump in, 'cause I don't know if this connection's a little
Nancy had-
faulty. Sorry, I'll take it. So Nancy asked,
Thanks,
how do we
Melissa.
get manufacturers to package their goods in recyclable materials?
That's a great question. And that's really where we need a lot of action as well. So there is a kind of an ad hoc group in Massachusetts called the Massachusetts Product Stewardship Council. And that's comprised of the Product Stewardship Institute. We're fortunate that we have this international kind of think tank on product stewardship right here in Massachusetts. So Product Stewardship Institute is very much involved with this Massachusetts effort. So is Conservation Law Foundation and some of the larger environmental groups that have a strong foothold in Massachusetts, Boston-based. There are a number of communities that participate on it as well, and Mass Recycle, another statewide organization. So it's called the Massachusetts Product Stewardship Council. And they're working together. Right now, they have a draft bill, and they're working with local legislators. They're trying to find some, I think, to sponsor the bill to release in this current session that would address products and packaging. So that there are other parts of how shall I say? There are other states, a few of them, and then other countries that have tried to tackle this, where the manufacturers become responsible for what they create. They're responsible for the cost of that, all the way through to its disposal. And so that's what this bill is about. And so if you're interested, I can connect you with the Mass Product Stewardship Council. And I'm sure they would welcome some involvement from municipalities. We've tried to dial some municipalities into the conversation. They look at things like paint, mattresses, electronics, all sorts of items for which there may be a more fair way to pay for the cost of disposing of it, rather than it being on the shoulders of communities who you're bearing the cost. And those costs are very high, frankly. You can reach out to manufacturers yourself, but I do think tapping into some of these groups that are doing it on a larger scale and letting if you tapped into this group and then letting your legislators know that you support this and you want them to support it, that's the kind of action that can really drive it. To say the burden shouldn't really rest with taxpayers for these products and packaging that really don't have a home. If it's plastic film and it's these sachets and it's these things, and they're constantly changing. And the recycling facilities are often put in a position where they're trying to pivot and take what they can, but instead, a lot more of what's coming in those doors is material that they can't sort for or sell as a commodity. It's problematic. So it's a long answer, but let me know, and I can send that a connection to you folks if you want to connect with the Product Stewardship Council. Yeah. Question in the chat, maybe. Other towns that have moved away from the buffet. So there are many different ways to slice this. So one end of the spectrum would be no limit on trash. And one of the map I showed earlier, the other community that was in the small map that was really red was Sherburne. They have no limit on their trash. I don't mean to shame anybody, but I talk to these communities. They're in my district all the time. They're also a transfer station, so you have to basically go to their transfer station and drop off your trash if you live there. But they have a high trash generation, tax funded as well. The other end of the spectrum would be a full, what we would call a full pay-as-you-throw program, where residents pay for every single bag of trash they put out. Those are going to have the least amount of trash generation. It's the greatest incentive for residents to reduce their trash, recycle as much as possible, compost, donate, think about what they're buying. We have decades of history and experience with it. It is our flagship program in Massachusetts. We give the largest grants to communities that do it. It works. The challenge, however, is always the political will to do it, because it takes some courage to say, we know this is the right thing. We're going to have to tighten our belts. And it asks residents to have to take out their wallet and pay for every bag of trash. It's a political challenge. How many towns have pay-as-you-throw? Current count statewide of 351 cities and towns, I believe it's 154. Okay, we add new ones every year. My district is, I can speak to my district, which is 44 cities and towns. 23 of them are pay-as-you-throw. Always working toward that, but I know how hard it is. And the community has to be ready for it and want it, honestly, because it's a very hard program politically to do. Not to do, but to get over the pushback, because there will always be pushback. Then there are variations in between. So I live in Sharon, I'm right next door. We have this sort of modified pay-as-you-throw where we do pay for our trash. We pay a certain amount for a small trash cart. It's more money for a medium-sized trash cart, and it's even more money for a large, very large trash cart. Some communities have, like Westwood has, you're near Westwood or Dedham. They have a single trash cart, which is a limit. It's 64 gallons, which is the equivalent of probably 5 to 6 kitchen bags, you know, those 13-gallon kitchen bags. They're pretty big. You've probably seen them in Westwood and Dedham, the size of those medium-sized, we call them medium-sized carts. You know, they would provide some benefit to Walpole. You'd see your trash go down with that size cart. So that's sort of like middle of the road in a way. So it would be a better performer than what you have, but it's not like a full pay-as-you-throw. If you're really interested in pay-as-you-throw, I could certainly come back another time and give you more data on that. But like the how shall I say, the rock stars in my region who have pay-as-you-throw would be, say, North Attleboro or Dartmouth, Massachusetts, where residents pay for every bag. And they generate, if you're at about a ton per household, they are probably, they're at about 1,100 pounds per household. So it's just about half, a little bit more than half of what you generate in trash. So it's a really big difference. But that's a decision within a community. You have to have the desire and will to do it. I'm sorry, I think someone else had a question. I'm not sure if I missed something.
Is my connection a little bit better?
Yes.
Okay, so we did have a couple questions on the chat. The first one is, why can't paper and cardboard be wet?
Cares.
They get wet. It's an interesting question, because in the pulping process, they ultimately get wet and broken down into fibers and made into new paper and cardboard. But when it goes to the recycling facility, which I see in the chat also, the desire to visit Charlestown, I would highly recommend going to your recycling facility, because if you could see when your material comes in and they empty that truck out, first of all, you just start and you stop and you take a look and you just really understand what people are throwing away. And it's somewhat shocking, because there's a lot of stuff that doesn't belong in there. And it's true for any community, not just Walpole by any means. But when you see that and you see the machinery and how they do the separation and the sorts, it becomes eminently clear that it has to be dry for it to pass over the screens. And their optical sorters are kind of assessing weight, and they use air to blow materials up. And so it'll affect the weight and the ability to sort it. They need it dry for the sortation process. Once it's sorted, they bale it into these giant, very heavy cubes that are a couple thousand pounds, and they tie it up with wire And that's what goes to market. When it gets to a pulping facility to be made into new paper or cardboard, that's when it can get wet. I hope that helps. Highly encourage you to visit when, I don't know if they're giving tours right now during COVID, but
So they're unfortunately, sorry,
Yes.
Kathy, they're not. So Rika and myself, we did reach out to our hauler who reached out to Casella directly. And with COVID, they're not having anyone enter the facility more than just their regular staff. And I don't anticipate this changing anytime in the near future. But once it is open, we can definitely take a field trip. I, like Kathy referenced, when I first started for the department, I was able to take a tour, and it is definitely eye-opening.
yeah. And you know, that's good to know, Melissa. And you know, it's, you could ask if they have any video of their process inside the facility that they could share, since they're not giving public tours. I believe they have something for their Auburn facility. So I don't know if they have a video for Charlestown, but I think even seeing one of their other facilities would illuminate the process for you. Let's see. Mandatory recycling, it looks like someone asked about. That can be a little bit tricky, I think. It depends on what your mandatory recycling bylaw or regulation says. A lot of communities have a mandatory recycling bylaw of some kind on the books. I think it's worthwhile. I don't know if Walpole has one off the top of my head. Typically, oh, you do? You do have one? I see maybe David nodding. Typically, a mandatory recycling bylaw would require generators of waste, residents, sometimes it includes businesses too, to separate recyclables from the trash. It's a good thing to have. It's a good thing to have that in place. I think a lot of people do it. If it's coupled with a requirement that there are the hauling companies, whomever you choose to use, will also pick up recyclables separate from trash. Those two types of regulations together are particularly effective. I don't want to take you too far into the weeds if I don't want to lose you on that, but mandatory recycling can be beneficial to have. It requires enforcement. And I find it most valuable in communities that couple that with a requirement on the collectors as well. So I see in communities with paper bag, how does a family discard piles of worthless stuff? So in pay-as-you-throw communities, usually there's no limit on trash per se. It's just that you have to pay for each unit that goes out. So if I did a giant clean out at my house, I've decided to, have the smallest trash cart. So I have a 35-gallon trash cart at my house. It's picked up every week. I don't think, maybe once in 3 years, I've needed an overflow bag. So we've got 4 people here and a dog. I compost, avid composter, and recycle everything I can. We do have weekly recycling with large carts, which makes it very, very easy. But one does not need weekly recycling. I think every other week can be perfectly fine with a large cart, because it really depends on what a household generates. So if I have overflow, I can buy a bag that costs, my husband bought it once. I think it was $2.40 or what have you. The cost of that overflow bag, the price is set to pay for the bag itself, the trash inside it, and disposal of that amount of trash. So as long as it's paid for, it's set up to be able to capture more trash. And that's pretty common in communities with pay-as-you-throw, that there's some overflow mechanism for a fee. So when you have those needs, if it's a full move out, I wouldn't recommend using the pay-as-you-throw bags, though I have seen it in Milton. I work with Milton, and sometimes I'll see a line of bags, all with their proper sticker on them, which is, hats off to the resident for doing it right. But I might find a company that can help with a move out. It might be more efficient that way. Rent a dumpster, yes, definitely can rent a dumpster. One of those companies, ideally you would recycle as much as possible, capture it, donate if you have good items, particularly, you know, at that furniture bank's great, again, great resource. If I can't see all the chat, so please, of course, raise your hand if there's something I'm not answering. It looks like Alan, yeah.
So Kathy, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time today. I love the Recycle Smart website and the Recyclopedia. I go to it all the time. In fact, we did another informational thing like this, and the woman, excuse me, the woman who runs the Recyclopedia was very helpful, and they constantly update it. So if you ask things, they're very good. I chat with them on Instagram regularly. One thing I would like to ask is there any way that you can expand on non-recyclables in the Recycle Smart program? So when I ask about my dry cleaning bag, it says put that in the trash. It doesn't say bring it to the supermarket as in-store recycling. And there's no way to expand on the in-store recycling. So I know that my Amazon bubble wrap pack is in-store recycling if I take the label off.
There's a great website where basically most of this film gets, you know, there's a hub for the plastic film kind of folks, but they're their segment of the industry. And I'll look it up, but I think it's plastic film recycling. And I'll send the link to Melissa and Rika and they can share. I'm going to write down the links I'm going to send to you. So plastic recycling link, Mass Product Stewardship Council. I'm just making notes to myself so I can send them to you. But that at that place, Alan, shows all the types of plastic film that are acceptable in those store take back programs. I wish that Recycle Smart maybe had more of that, and that's a good tip that I'm sure Janice has been asked for that to do that. It's Janice that's probably communicating with you. I think if we continue to ask, I will see if that's something that they can modify, because I do wish they would say bring to your store drop-off program.
And another thing for the masses that I found out that I thought was excellent is that the in-store recycling, what happens to that is it becomes more or less the plastic wrap that they ship a lot of those pallets to the different stores in. So you asked what happens to the plastic, you know, once it goes to the recycle facility. I found it interesting that that's what happens to that in-store plastic. It goes to a facility and they make thinner plastic that they wrap the pallets. If you ever see deliveries to big stores that are all wrapped in plastic, and I go, oh my God, there's more plastic waste, but it's actually, most of it's recycled plastic, I guess.
It's really interesting, yeah, because you're right. And that's why those stores even set up those programs to a certain extent, because they have so much that has that shrink wrap around it. So they generate a lot of it themselves. And so the public areas are really just an add-on to what they already do behind the scenes. And then they take it all back. Some of it becomes new film. Some of it becomes like Trex. You may have heard of Trex products, like their decking, those composite products that have that film as one of the inputs. It looks like someone put the link up for plastic film recycling. Excellent. Perfect. That is the website, plasticfilmrecycling.org. And it shows, because you can even put like bread bags in there, like you said, dry cleaner bags, the bubble wrap, if you kind of pop them or what have you. But a lot of those can go back to those film collection programs. It's great. And I will say that I've been to these recycling facilities. Recently, I was with the Mansfield officials at the waste management facility, and Mansfield has a ban on plastic bags, and they were doing an audit of their recyclables. And they were very clear at the facility to say that they very rarely see plastic bags now in their recycling because the town banned them, which is really great because it reduces the cost to the town. If those bags end up in the recycling stream, it ends up being a cost back to you. So by keeping them out of that, it's a cleaner stream and it saves money.
I believe David had a question.
Oh,
Hi. First, I'd like to thank Kathy for coming. I was actually got me out of inactive status. I haven't been at these meetings for some time, but I was very interested to see what you had to say. I asked a question about mandatory recycling, and you touched on it, but really not the gist of my question. If you could tell us about cities and towns in Massachusetts that do actively enforce mandatory recycling. I believe we have a bylaw. I'm told, everybody's told that recycling is mandatory in Walpole. You can look around and see it's very spotty, and I've been banging the drum. I'll bang it again. How do we enforce it? Can you tell us anything you've seen around the state?
Yeah, it is. David, it's tricky. There have been a few communities, not in my district, but nearby, years back that had some enforcement of mandatory recycling. And the way they chose to do it, if I recall, was that their trash wouldn't be picked up unless their recycling bin was out. Theoretically, it sounds good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people will do that. Some people got ticked off and basically like put it out empty and put one can in it. And the thing is, they can't, if it gets picked, I know people, believe me, because there are, 6.5 million Massachusetts residents, and there's 6.5 million different ways to do it, I suppose, or different levels of understanding about this. Some would do it, some would get frustrated. They have to leave the recycling bin out, even if it's already been emptied by the hauler, so that when the trash truck comes by, they can see that the recycling bin is out, because those are two different drivers on two different trucks. So there are some logistical challenges to enforcing it that way. One of the ways I think is probably a little bit easier is to work with the hauling company that's driving around and picking up, and eyeballing the recycling a little bit. So either if it's wrong, for them to like kind of let you know, they can be a daily log that they can provide the town with of where the problem spots are. And some communities get a daily log. So, Kathy's house, 12 Smith Street or whatever it is, never puts out recycling. The drivers are, as I say, they're the gold mine. They know what's happening in the town kind of better than anybody, really, because they go by every stop every week. They see it all and they know it inside out. Your drivers are real partners in this. So they could let you know, these households never recycle. And then maybe the committee or what have you could reach out and say, hey, we have a recycling bylaw or mandatory recycling. Can we help teach you how to do this right? Or whatever touch you want to have. It doesn't have to be punitive. It could be, we want to help you recycle. We want to make sure you have the information to do it right. The haulers, the drivers can also let you know, like if they eyeball it and they see a recycling bin and it's got Christmas lights in it, it should never be picked up. It should be left behind, left with a sticker of some kind, and then they let the town know, we didn't pick up at David's house because it had Christmas lights in the recycling bin. And then it allows the opportunity to communicate with that address and that household about, hey, we noticed this. Please know that these are the rules. And they also, the resident will also know that you're paying attention to the program and that you want to do it right. It helps with that education. So mandatory can show itself in different ways. It's seeing the right thing in the right bin. If you want to enforce the bin to be out, I've only seen a handful of those, and there's been pushback on it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you do it in Sharon. I mean, how do you enforce it in Sharon?
I wish it was enforced better, because I'm just a volunteer here. I mean, it's also in my district, so I kind of wear two hats, but I don't have any authority in Sharon. But I think there's some background noise. I'm not sure if someone can hear that, but is it enforced? We do have mandatory recycling here. I don't think it's enforced. I do see most households recycle. The challenge I see primarily, well, we have two carts. We have a big recycling cart and we all have trash carts, but different size trash carts depending on what resident decided to pay into. And the thing that I see sometimes is items in the the recycling cart, the lid's up and there's material sticking out that doesn't belong there. that's a flag. So that shouldn't get picked up. That should get reported. Some communities will have occasionally a staff, it's something, I don't want to say volunteers, but maybe a part-time person doing some enforcement compliance checks at the curb. It's rare, I have to say, just because budget's usually too tight for that. But there are some larger communities that do it in my area. Taunton has someone, New Bedford. North Attleboro gets out and does a lot of spot checking. It can even be occasional spot checking to just kind of get out there and see what's going on. Again, talking to the drivers to get a pulse. They know. They trust me. Trust me. I've been doing this for 22 years and they know. I don't know if I'm answering your question well, David. It's not easy to enforce mandatory recycling on its own, but I think that any educational piece that goes out that says Walpole requires that residents recycle, that you separate recyclables from trash. This is how to do it right. This is the way to do it, and share resources. I think the reminders, I started the presentation with the waste bans. These are state regulations. Some communities use those and they'll say, did you know that the state, has these regulations that tell us that we're not supposed to put any of this in the trash. There's also, on Recycle Smart, it's slightly off topic, but there's a fun little quiz that sort of tests people. You can post that onto a Facebook page. It's like a 2-minute quiz about does this get recycled in your bin or not? And I've shared it with a lot of people, and I think they're sometimes surprised about the basics that they may not even understand. So
I appreciate it. Thank you. The drivers know a lot. I walk my dog. I'm all over town. I know a lot. There's a set of people that don't care. They just, and they won't, and they won't. And there doesn't seem to be any, what's the word? There's just no price, no, I just think there's something that could be done. Can enforce it or you're not. I'm just
David,
banging my drum.
You're right. I think you're absolutely right. And I think that, it's usually like one of a few different reasons why people will do it, because they care about the environment, because it costs them money, because they have to do it, because it's the law. Those are usually that's the three-legged stool. Like, why do they do it?
Mm-hmm.
So do they know that this matters in terms of climate change? Do they know that this actually really matters a lot? The amount of waste we're generating, because it's a one-way street when we're manufacturing products and consuming them and using them and trashing them. That's not sustainable. It just isn't. So there are the environmental reasons that might motivate folks to do the right thing. If that's not going to move some people, well, young people in the discussion can help, because a lot of young people get it in the schools. I find that high schoolers and having like the messenger can matter with these things. I think the fact that your program allows for 6 barrels a week, it doesn't send the right message.
That's a problem.
It doesn't send the right message. So the right message is something different than that. It's why we need to tighten our belts. It can still be very fair. It can be fair and reasonable, but not kind of maybe invite in so much. And I know that your officials are working on that now.
I wasn't surprised at all to see that Walpole is red. Let's just put it that way. I mean, it's a red town, but that's a different thing. But I'm not surprised at all that we're doing a ton a year per household.
And a household like
thanks.
yours might do much, much better than that, right? And probably the key
Right.
is how do you?
Yeah, but that was an average, right? That was an average, a ton.
It's only an average, so.
Yeah, so if I do half that, then someone does twice that, and you just have to walk down the street and see who it is. But that's enough out of me. Thank you.
So I'm going to jump in real quick because we
Yeah.
are nearing the end of our time. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to Kathy for taking the time to come speak with us. And kind of to David's point and what Kathy has mentioned, in a year and a half, our contract is up. I know Melissa, Jim Johnson, and Kathy are working to see what that next contract's going to look like. So input is definitely wanted, and then also building support in the community for where they go. So please, like, that's something we can work on discussing next meeting to kind of see what our goal as a committee can be this year, what we would like to do. Like, one thing that we can make our goal for 2021, and maybe that can be garnering support for that new contract in a year and a half, or it can be figuring out how we can get information out about recycling and work on reducing the trash limits. I know Jessica, she's on the call. She's done a great job with the high school on composting. I know she mentioned that. So maybe we can figure out at our next meeting kind of what our goal can be, and take some of that information that Kathy shared with us. Additionally, if you have other questions for Kathy that we didn't get time with tonight, please email me. I can pass those along to her. I know she's a great resource, and that she would get back to us with those answers. So with that, Kathy, thank you so much. Right now, our next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, March 23rd at 5:30. I'll get the information out. If you have anything that you want me to put on the agenda for that meeting, or that you feel like we should discuss, especially after our call today, let me know, and I'd be happy to add it. And maybe we can kind of build off of what was discussed tonight.
I just want to thank all of you. Thanks for the time, but thank all of you for caring and doing the hard work, because it's all of you that make the change. And I'm not saying that lightly. You know, I'm grateful to have the time to talk with you. I know that as a volunteer in my town, it took a lot of time to get that ground game and get the message that we wanted, organize, and then talk to everybody that would possibly hear why we thought that was the right thing to do for the community, why it mattered. And that, you know, you want to probably think about what that might look like in your community. So thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy.
Take care.
Thank you. Have a nice night, everyone.
Thank you very much. It was a great meeting. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.